Well, welcome to session 3 of Christianity Explained. This one is all about the resurrection, which is key to Christianity. If there's no resurrection, Christianity is just another religion. If the resurrection is true, it changes everything. In the first session, we were thinking about who is Jesus Christ, and the claim of the Bible and the claim made verbally by Jesus Christ himself is that he is the Son of God. He's God, the Creator, who left the glory of heaven and became a man without ceasing to be God. Jesus is one person, but he has two natures, fully God, fully man. We see him behaving as man. He's tired, he's hungry. He's also behaving as God. He can calm a storm, he can heal people. We heard about his claims. We saw his amazing actions, his authority over people, his authority over evil, his authority over sickness, his authority over nature, his authority to call people to change the direction of their lives. And remember, C.S. Lewis said we have a choice based on his claims. Either he is Lord, that is who he claimed to be, or he's a blatant liar, and therefore not worthy of being followed, or he's a lunatic, totally deranged, Lord, liar, or lunatic. That was session 1. And then last time in session 2, we thought about why he came to earth. He didn't come to heal the sick, to calm a storm, to give great teaching. He was doing that from heaven. He didn't come to set us a great example. That would be mere mockery. No one can live as he lived. No, he came with one great purpose. He came to die. And he came to die the death that we deserve, so that we could escape that death and we might have a life that we don't deserve. In Mark chapter 10 and verse 45, Jesus says this, I didn't come to be served, but to serve, and to give my life as a ransom for many. His death pays a ransom price to set us free from our sin. Well, there's the claim. But is it true? And it all depends on the resurrection. Here is the central, vital truth of Christianity. If the resurrection didn't happen, we can keep Christianity as a religion, but there's no power there. There's no hope there. Paul, writing to a church in Corinth, says this in the 15th chapter of his first letter. And if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. And later on in verse 16 of that same chapter, for if the dead are not raised, then Christ has not been raised either. And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile, and you are still in your sins. Then those also who have fallen asleep in Christ, they are lost. If only for this life we have hope in Christ, we are to be pitied more than all men. The resurrection is absolutely vital. I remember reading in the Guardian newspaper just a couple of years ago now, a fascinating article where the author said this: there is no question that Jesus lived and died. The question is this: did he die and live? Many have poured scorn on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Even bishops have poured scorn on the resurrection. They say, well, he rose in the disciples' thinking. It was wishful thinking, but there was no physical resurrection. That even comes from bishops. One former Archbishop of Durham, Bishop of Durham, said this: the resurrection is nothing more than a conjuring trick with old bones. But the resurrection is central. And I want to point out this from Mark's Gospel today, that the resurrection, first of all, was predicted by Jesus Christ himself on 3 notable occasions in rapid succession. Jesus talks about his resurrection. Mark 8 and verse 31. Then he, that's Jesus, began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. The very next chapter, Mark chapter 9 and verse 31. The Son of Man, said Jesus, is going to be betrayed to the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise again. Mark chapter 10. These are very clear words. If English and language means anything, these words are very, very clear. Mark chapter 10 and verse 33. We are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. It was predicted by Jesus. Now, certainly anybody can predict their death. You might have said, well, the way things were going, the tide of popular opinion was going to turn against him. He might well have predicted his death. I could predict my death. You could predict yours. But to predict your resurrection is quite another thing. Notice this too. The disciples were not expecting a resurrection. The resurrection was not expected. In Mark chapter 16, we find the women going to the tomb to anoint his body, And in verse 3 of Mark chapter 16, the women are facing a problem. They asked each other, who will roll away the stone from the entrance to the tomb? They were not expecting a resurrection. Even after Christ had risen from the dead, the two people on the road to Emmaus were despondent. We had hoped he was the one who was going to redeem Israel, but now he is dead. Another question is this: did it really happen? Did it really happen? The evidence, I believe, is overwhelming. It's forensic, it can be examined, it stands, and it has stood the test of time. There was an atheistic journalist called Frank Morris who set out to write a book which would disprove the resurrection. He thought he'd go back to basics and he would write a book that would poo-poo and disprove the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Well, he did his investigations. He painstakingly looked into all the facts. Secular historians who wrote about Jesus, his life, his death, his supposed resurrection, into the Gospels themselves. And this man, Frank Morris, eventually wrote a book called Who Moved the Stone? And he became convinced, so convinced in the resurrection, that Morris became a Christian. And the first chapter of that book, which I'd recommend to you, Who Moved the Stone? You can still get it on Amazon and all good bookstores, I'm sure. The first chapter is called The Book That Refused to Be Written. Did it happen? Let's look at the facts. Jesus lived. Jesus died. They are indisputable facts. It's 2020, because of the life of Jesus Christ. Secular historians wrote about his life and his death. Tacitus and Pliny and Josephus write extensively about this person of history, Jesus Christ. There's no doubt that he lived and that he died. After his death, he was buried, and we're told it was in the grave, the tomb of a rich man. Out of the pity of that rich man, he gave him his tomb. He was buried. So concerned were the religious people, the Pharisees and the scribes, about his prediction that he would come back again from the dead, that they had the tomb guarded. A stone was rolled over the entrance, a Roman seal was put on the tomb, and a Roman guard was set there, a quaternary of Roman guards to keep watch over the tomb on pain of their own deaths if anybody disturbed the tomb. They are indisputable facts. Here's another fascinating fact. There is no doubt historically It is not disputed that the tomb was empty on the third day, and that has been the claim over the rolling centuries ever since, the empty tomb. What happened to the body of Jesus Christ? What happened to his body? You can go to Mecca and find the body there of Muhammad. You can go to Highgate Cemetery in London and find the tomb of Karl Marx. But when you go to Jerusalem, there is an empty tomb. There is no grave anywhere on planet Earth for this one who had such a profound effect on the life and the course of this whole planet. 2020 because of him. Where is his grave? Well, there isn't one. There isn't one. The tomb was empty. The question is this: what happened to his body? Now we can examine this again forensically. There are only a few possibilities. Let's examine them one by one. First of all, some say, well, his disciples stole the body and then put up the hoax and claimed a resurrection. Is that feasible? That these 12 frightened men who were scattered, fear of their lives, would go and get past the Roman guard, move away the stone, take out the body and dispose of it somewhere else, and then go around proclaiming a resurrection? On one level, you might think that is possible. But bear in mind this: of those 12 disciples, Judas, of course, takes his own life. Of the rest, only John survives into old age and is found in his 90s on the island of Patmos, exiled for declaring Jesus and the resurrection. The other 10 died martyrs' deaths, proclaiming that Jesus not only died but rose again from the dead. They went to their graves, they went to a martyr's death, they endured torture and great pain, and they did not recant. Would you do that for a hoax and for a lie? Certainly not. They must have been absolutely certain of what they were saying. Some say, okay, if the disciples didn't steal it, then the Jews, the religious authorities, took hold of it for safekeeping. If that was so, when the disciples declared Jesus and the resurrection, all they had to do is produce the body, and Christianity is dead at the very beginning. And even if they couldn't produce the body because they'd disposed of it, the disciples again went to their own deaths, declaring they'd seen him and encountered the risen Jesus Christ. Others say, well, maybe he didn't really die on the cross. He just swooned and then put into the tomb. He revived in the cool of the tomb. Is that possible? Is that possible? Romans were experts at executions. A spear was thrust in his side and blood and water emerged. He was put in the tomb. The stone was rolled over. The guard is there. Are we to believe that he would revive with those terrible wounds, push away the stone and go up to his disciples and say, "Oh, I've conquered death. I've conquered death"? Not at all. Wouldn't be convincing at all. And again, the disciples went to their martyrs' deaths, declaring Jesus and the resurrection. Maybe some say, well, the disciples hallucinated. It was just wishful thinking. Well, they weren't expecting a resurrection. And he appeared to Jesus on many numerous occasions to many, many of them at different times and in different places, different situations. And we're told in the Corinthian epistle on one occasion he appeared to 500 people in one place at one time. No, hallucinations do not work like that. And again, many went to their martyrs' deaths declaring a real physical resurrection. No, the only likely scenario is that he actually came back from the dead. The tomb is empty because he is risen. He is risen. Sherlock Holmes, the great detective, has a famous saying: Watson, in trying to solve any mystery, once you have removed all the likely scenarios, whatever is left however unlikely it might seem, is the actual truth. Let's read the resurrection account itself. Mark chapter 16 and verse 1 to 7. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so they might go and anoint Jesus' body. They were not expecting a resurrection. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll away the stone from the entrance of the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." So many times he said he would rise again. He is not here. He is risen. Once you discarded all the likely scenarios, the disciples stole it, the Jews stole it, he didn't really die, they were hallucinating. Whatever is left, however unlikely it might seem to be, is the truth. He is not here. He is risen. Well, let's finish with a couple of conclusions as to what the resurrection of Jesus Christ means. First of all, it means that he is exactly who he claimed to be. During his lifetime, the Jewish authorities challenged him. What authority do you have? What sign can you show us that you do have the authority to make these great claims? And Jesus said, "Destroy this temple." He meant his own body. "And I will raise it again in 3 days." That is the sign that Jesus is who he claimed to be. And the resurrection tells us that Jesus Christ really is who he claimed to be. He is the Son of God. In the letter to the Romans in chapter 1 and the 4th verse, we are told this, that Jesus was declared to be the Son of God with power by his resurrection from the dead. It declares him to be who he claimed to be. I mean, today, if I claim to be Superman, I can make the claim. You might say to me, "Well, prove it." Now, how can I prove it? Well, I would go into a telephone box. I'd come out with a cape and a pair of tights and a t-shirt with a big S on it, and I'd be able to fly around, and I'd have my laser eyes. I'd need to do something to prove it. The resurrection from the dead proves that Jesus Christ is exactly who he claimed to be. He is the Son of God. Secondly, and vitally, the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and this is wonderful for you and for me, proves that his work actually works. His work on the cross as paying for the sins of mankind actually works. He has conquered death and hell and sin and destruction, proved by his resurrection from the dead. God the Father is saying of the work of his Son, Jesus Christ, I accept his work on the cross. He is released from death. The resurrection proves that he is who he claimed to be, and his death on the cross was effective. And because of that, you and I, by simply trusting Jesus Christ, not trusting religion, not trusting ourselves, not trusting morality, but trusting Jesus Christ alone, we can know what it is to be forgiven, and we can know what it is to come to know God through Jesus Christ. Let me finish with a story. It's a true story. Harry Houdini, the great escapologist. He could escape from many scenarios, tie him up, put him in a box, chains, padlocks, put it in a water tank. He would escape. Before he died, he said to his wife, "Wife, if there is any way to escape death, I will find it. I will find it. And he said to his wife before his death, put a candle in the window every year after my death, and if there's a way to escape death, I will come back to you. Every year she lit that candle. He never came back. Jesus Christ, on the other hand, many times said, I will die, but I will come back. And he came back. It is proof that he is who he claimed to be, and his work actually works. Transformed the lives of those disciples from fearful men to those who went out giving their lives, proclaiming not only Jesus, but Jesus and the resurrection. It changed my life. It can change your life too. Well, do keep on reading through Mark's Gospel. You'll have things to read through in the coming week. There are a couple of testimonies to watch online now as well. So until next week, that's all for this session. Jesus and the resurrection.